on the surface, something that appears to be fairly simple, it's honey and chili peppers, but the actual infusion
Process.
process is a
Yeah.
lot more
It's hard.
complicated than meets the
Sort of
eye.
like a good wine.
Yes.
Yes. And I think, it's very hard to patent a recipe in the food world. It's
Right.
not something that you can commonly patent. So really what you're doing is you're building a brand.
You're listening to Marketing Matters on the Wharton Podcast Network, our weekly podcast where we analyze the latest in advertising, marketing, customer behavior, new product launches, retailing, branding, everything marketing. I'm Barbara Kahn, the Patty and J.H. Baker Professor of Marketing, and I'm joined by my co-host, Americus Reed, the Whitney M. Young Jr. Professor of Marketing, and the brand identity theorist. And he has a new identity theorist speech that you should tune in on, a whole new idea that maybe we could talk about later as well.
Yeah,
but today, we are very happy to be joined by Mike Kurtz, who's the founder of Mike's Hot Honey. If you haven't heard of this product, it's a cult favorite. It's founded in 2010 by our guest, Mike Kurtz, in Brooklyn, New York. And you know what happens in Brooklyn has got to be trendy and cool.
Yes.
But what it is honey that's infused with chili. And it's an interesting story about how you can take a pretty simple idea and turn it into an entirely new category. And along the way, kind of reinvent the marketing toolkit. And so we're really excited to talk to Mike about this incredible story. So welcome, Mike, to our show.
Hi, Mike.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. It's an honor to be speaking with you.
Before you jump in, Barbara, I just want to say, Mike, thank you so much. I am team salty and sweet. And your product is phenomenal because I once had it
team hot and heavy. So I
there
love
you go.
chilies.
The perfect compliment. And so I remember having it on my chicken and waffles, Mike, and it was
So let's start.
kiss.
Let's start with your origin story. I read, Mike, that you saw this product in 2004 in Brazil. And that's kind of, maybe that's true, maybe it's what the internet says. You can tell us if that's true, but that you kind of took that idea and ran with it. And a lot of what happened over the time was the collaborations and the interest. And I don't think Brooklyn was irrelevant either. So why don't you tell us the way you know your origin story?
Yeah, so I was a college student studying Portuguese in Brazil in 2003. And on a weekend trip, I went to a national park with some friends. We went hiking for a few days. We were camping, eating food over the campfire for a few days. And then at the end of our trip, on the last day of the hike, we descended into a little valley. And we found a pizzeria there that had jars of honey with whole chili peppers steeping in the honey for drizzling on the pizzas. And I tasted the combination of honey and chili peppers on this pizza, and I was blown away.
Yeah.
And just loved the combination of the sweet floral notes of the honey with the heat from the chili peppers and the savory elements of the pie and the way it all came together. It just kind of stuck with me. This is not a Brazilian thing. It's not something that's common in Brazil. And the owner of the pizzeria is not Brazilian. He's, I believe he's Swiss, but had settled there and had a tiny little pizzeria in this valley. So that was the inspiration that led to the creation of Mike's Hot Honey. I got back to the States a year later. I was a senior in college. I kept on thinking about that experience, and I started experimenting with honey chili pepper infusions in my college apartment. Came up with the recipe. I was trying to infuse the flavor and heat of chili peppers into honey, but I wanted to create something that was truly an infused honey, not a honey-based sauce.
Got it.
So I tested lots of different ways to infuse heat and flavor into honey until I landed on the recipe that we still use today. My roommate walked into the apartment, saw me drizzling on a slice of pizza, asked me what it was. I said, "It's Mike's Hot Honey." Those were the first words out of my mouth, and it just stuck.
That's fantastic.
So Mike, I could imagine going to a restaurant or Brazil or anywhere in the world, tasting something really good, maybe trying to reproduce it. But the next step, taking it to a product, that
100%.
wouldn't have been my inclination. Like that to me is a huge leap. I mean, that's a cool story, but
Very
that's
cool
just
story.
like for your own use and maybe your roommates. How did you,
Yes.
what made you think to
Yes.
start a business?
Right. Because we always talk about, Mike, to Barbara's point, is that this challenge of something that you experience inside your own body feels so powerful and visceral and real, but you're not sure. It's like, will other people feel this way?
Or even if they do, you could just serve it to them at dinner. You don't have to start a whole business.
Yes. So talk to us about that entrepreneurial mindset that apparently took over so greatly.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a hobby for a long time before it became a business. So, when I first started making it, my intent was to just make it for my own personal use. And I've always been a big pizza guy. My friend's family growing up owned a pizzeria. I was always around pizza, loved pizza, and thought of this as this incredible new pizza condiment that I could use at home. So started making it for myself, and then eventually I was giving it out to friends and family around the holidays, and people would try it when they come to my house, and everybody who tried it had the same reaction. It was always like
Ooh.
oh, and so there was like a 1 second delay, and then the heat kind of hits on the back of the palate.
Yeah.
And
I
a
love
lot
that
of people
feeling
just love
myself.
Yeah. That's
I
Yeah.
just love it.
research results, as they say.
I think everybody's tasted chili peppers and honey on their own, but most people had never experienced the combination of those two things in their purest form. And it turned out to be this magical combination, and people seem to love it. So it was 6 years of it being a hobby. I moved to New York right after I graduated from college. I worked in the music business at a record label, and we had a bottle of Mike's Hot Honey in the break room there. So my colleagues at the record label, we used to joke about it. Oh, maybe this will be a business someday. Ha ha ha. But I didn't really think too seriously about it until I started working as a pizza apprentice at Paulie G's in Greenpoint, Brooklyn.
Nice.
My passion for pizza led me there, and I met Paulie when he first opened the restaurant in 2010. And he came by my table as I was finishing up my meal, and we started chatting about his business, his pizza oven, his dough recipe. And I was hitting him with all these questions about, his pizza, and he could tell I was really into making pizza, and invited me to become an apprentice there. So I took him up on his offer. I started going in after my day job, learning how to stretch dough, learning all the prep process and working the oven. And eventually I was fast enough, they started putting me on dinner shifts, and I started working there making pizzas.
That's incredible.
And
Interesting background.
I know.
I brought in a bottle of Mike's Hot Honey, which at the time just had the recipe and the name, but no branding, no packaging around it. And he tasted it and he liked it and asked me if I could make it for the restaurant to use on top of the pies. And I started making it one small batch at a time in the back of the pizzeria, summer of 2010. And once people could taste it on the pizzas, it just became a hit out of the restaurant. They started asking me where they could buy bottles, and I wasn't selling bottles. I was selling started selling unmarked pint containers out of the back of the kitchen in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually my roommate at the time, John Ozarico, was a childhood friend of mine. Actually, one of my good friends from kindergarten. We moved to New York together. He was starting his career in graphic design, and he designed the original packaging for the product. He obviously knew me very well, and we decided we really wanted to make something that felt classic, that felt like it could fit in with the other products that you might find in a pizzeria.
Interesting.
And created the original packaging in 2010, and then we started selling the first bottles off the bar at Paulie G's November of 2010.
Wow. I love that. Can I just say, I want to be a pizza apprentice. It sounds like that would be like the coolest thing
it sounds
ever.
like you have the right background. You're a musician, just like Mike, and that clearly leads right to pizza making.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a clear connection there. I love this.
There's something great about working with the dough, and where the layout for Paulie G's, the pizza oven and the make table where the pies are made is open to the floor of the restaurant. So we call it the pizza theater. So there's this theatrical element where you're up there making pizzas, but you're also performing, and you're putting on a show.
Customer
for folks
experience.
who are dining there, and you get to interact with them and they can see you. So it was a fun place to work, and wood fired pizza at the time was pretty new in New York City. So it was, we had like a 2-hour wait every night, and it was an exciting time to be working there.
What I love about you telling the story so carefully, so and then this happened, is it's clearly authentic. I mean, it's clearly, this is exactly what happened. It wasn't top down. It was kind of the way it happened. And my guess is when we go into the rest of it, because the rest of the story gets like amazing, like this stuff on ice cream, the partnerships you did. But I'm just guessing, and I haven't heard you tell it yet, that it kept going along this way, slowly, steady. Things just kind of happened authentically. And that's this is my guess, of what resonated with people also. It's as much the story as the product. Do you think that's true, or?
Yeah, I think people certainly connected with the story, especially the pizza community, and we can get into that later. But the pizza community
There's
really
a pizza
became the back.
community?
Absolutely, and they became the backbone of the brand, and the pizzerias around the country that became the first pizzerias to feature the product really exposed their communities to our brand. And so that was really like the framework that initially helped us grow, and it's still really the backbone of the brand today. But I think it was a combination of that community, and also just people loved what was in the bottle before there was any packaging on it. People liked the product.
But I do
without
like the
any brand
idea of
around
this
it.
community, the pizza community, because that obviously that viral bottom-up community engagement is a big way to grow exponentially. Like if you just stayed in that one little pizzeria, with your friends, it would have been a great experience, 2-hour waits every day, but it wouldn't be the international success or national success it is today. And that is interesting to tap into a close-knit community, the pizza community, that has certain characteristics, certain like loyalty, almost like a sports community. And then I think you partnered eventually with California Pizza Kitchen, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah, lots of pizza chains all over the country
Interesting.
have picked up the product. But yeah, it was kind of I think the pizzerias around the country that were maybe the best pizzeria in their respective markets, they saw the success that we were having with the honey at Pauly G's, and they felt like this was a product that was kind of like of the pizza community, that was one of their own. And so they kind of adopted the brand, and also my own, my passion for pizza, my own curiosity, and my search for great pizza led me to meet all these people. And it sort of happened organically. Like, my customers became my friends, and we all sort of became this big family. And now
awesome.
like I could go to any town in the US, and there's a great pizzeria using our product who's taking pride in what they're doing. And you couldn't ask for a better vehicle for somebody to taste your product, somebody who's really putting passion and great quality and care into the pizza they're serving. So
since you're in this pizza community, do you know the pizza guy on Barstool? Do you know like that guy who goes around New York and tastes pizzas?
I've never met him, but
you know who I'm talking
I
about?
know of him. Yeah.
Portnoy, I believe is his last name. Yeah, that's interesting.
But it's funny because that's another aspect of this community. It's kind of people really seem invested in their pizza
and their reviews for pizza. Yeah, I love that point, Mike. So let me ask you this, because this is kind of interesting, as Barbara's talking about. We and something we discuss in marketing a lot is the so-called product life cycle, right? Introduction, growth, and all of that kind of stuff. Talk a little bit about, as you began to get really big, and to Barbara's point about you have this community that's really the pillar of where it started, core users, if you will. Family was the word you use. As you start to scale and get bigger and start to bringing in lots more people and businesses into the space, what were some of both the sort of marketing perhaps challenges, but also the challenges that are associated with trying to scale, but also trying to hold on to that authenticity in the core? Like what were some of the things that you did to do that in a much less frictionless way?
Yeah. So we're a New York brand, and we're based in Brooklyn, right around the corner from the pizzeria where this all started. And we've held on to that identity, and I think we as we've grown, we still try to operate like a small brand. And when I was launching the product, I had gone through the supermarket and I'm looking at the brands on the shelf, and there's some quality products on the shelf. There's some stuff that's not so good. But I think, like, in terms of branding and marketing, I saw a real opportunity to connect with people in a more genuine, authentic way than some of the brands on the shelf were doing at the time. And I think that's definitely changed in the last 15, 20 years. Even bigger brands have focused more on trying to connect in a genuine way with consumers. But 20 years ago, it was you walk down the aisle and you just see a lot of brands that are just disconnected from their consumer base. And so I thought, man, there's certainly an opportunity here to connect with people in a genuine way. So as we grew, we always tried to hold on to our New York community and focus on our New York community and the New York storytelling. And that's what's true to us.
So let me interrupt you for 1 second, because that to me is a light bulb moment, because you're talking about the growth strategy. So, one way to scale is just increase penetration, which is what Americus was talking about, what you were talking about. You go from a small community to a big community. The second way to grow is like, okay, what are we going to do next? And one way you could do it is, okay, you have hot honey. Let's now have I don't know, cucumber honey. I'm just making that up. Obviously, that's not a good idea. But, or you could go to maple syrup. You could go to some other product, or you could stay with the product and go deeper into your community. And it seems like that's more like what you did, because you went more into like, what else could you take my product and put it on that my community would like? And maybe they would like it on ice cream, or maybe they would. I mean, it's a slightly different kind of strategy. Was that deliberate?
And by the way, Mike,
was because of the way you were talking, that you felt like this connection with your community.
Yeah.
It sounds like that is what was driving your next steps.
And by the way, Mike, you're free to use any of Barbara's ideas. We've got cucumbers on the table. We've got ice cream. Yeah, feel free. Take any of those ideas and run with them.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no like secret to how we've done this. It's really just, again, it's like we're a New York brand. If you live in New York, that's like some of the best marketing education you could get just living in New York, regardless of whether you work in the field of marketing or not. You're exposed to all these brands, all these artists, culture that's exported from New York around the world. So, there's real power in being a brand rooted in New York and just living, being outside, involved in the community in New York. You meet so many people, you make so many connections, and you feed back into that community. That's kind of how we built the brand. We didn't try to look too far beyond our local community in New York. And then, as I mentioned before, the larger pizza community, which is really a global community of people who just love pizza. And with the growth of the internet and social media, people are now able to share so much of that information and know-how and their experiences. And so pizza overall has just gotten better around the world just because of the information sharing that's going on. But yeah, New York has played a huge role for us as a brand, and I think that it's obviously becomes more and more challenging as you grow and you're partnering with bigger and bigger brands, and these partnerships, whether it's with a restaurant or with a CPG product, you're bringing two brands together with two different identities and different histories, and you're trying to respect both brands and do it in a classy way, and so the only way to do it, I think, is to just be truthful about what it is. It's like, we partner with, trying to think of an example. It's like we partner with Lou Malnati's, which is an icon of the Chicago pizza scene, and they're famous for their Chicago thin crust and deep dish pizza, and they're an institution in Chicago. And it was a big deal for us as a New York brand to partner with them. But a lot of the marketing around that partnership really played up that relationship and the tension between Chicago and New York, the sort of history of New Yorkers looking down on Chicago as a second city, and Chicagoans having this sort of like animosity towards New York. I mean, we played that up in some of the marketing, and then, you know, as that relationship grew, that brand and Lou Malnati's, they exposed us to the Chicago market in a really big way and endeared us to Chicagoans. And so, you know, now, for example, we just launched a CPG product with Garrett, the popcorn brand that's based out of Chicago, another
that's a good
iconic
match.
Chicago brand.
That's awesome.
And, you know, Garrett is not, it may not be known like globally or even nationally, but if you're in the Midwest or in the greater Chicago area, it's a big deal. It's a brand that really means something to people. Yeah. And so when we look at partnerships, we're trying to partner with brands that share our values, love partnering with brands that have a rich history, and we try to honor their history when we're promoting the brands.
Oh, I'm looking at your list of collaborations and I'm seeing the pattern. Dunkin' is like a Boston brand. Utz is a Pennsylvania brand.
Yes.
These are brands with passionate communities.
Big time.
That's really interesting. I didn't see that till you connected the dots for me.
Nice.
Yeah, you know, Utz was a fun one. We have potato chips with Utz. Mike's a honey chips, and they're delicious and really fun. You know, after selling a very novel product that you have to explain to people for many, many years, it's great to sell to promote a potato chip. Everybody knows what to do with a potato chip. So that was a fun vehicle for the brand, but also, you know, and you know, for us as a New York brand, when we promoted that partnership, we looked at like, what does Utz mean to New Yorkers? And to New Yorkers, Utz is the bodega potato chip. That's when you know, growing up, you go to the bodega, you go to the corner store, you grab a little bag of Utz with your sandwich. Like that's, you know, every kid who grows up in New York experiences that. So we have a friend whose aunt owns a bodega in Corona, Queens, and she let us have the bodega for a day. We shot a bunch of content there, but we tried to center it around that experience, and sort of connect to the nostalgia that New Yorkers have for that brand.
So one of the things that we talk about in marketing, and I don't actually want to label you like this because I feel like what you're doing is authentic and I don't want to put it in this category, but there is kind of theory in marketing about cult brands, brand love, this kind of notion that those are different types of brands. And like I said, I don't want to label it because it feels like not fair, but it does sound like you're describing something in terms of brand building that's a very different style of marketing than some of this like Super Bowl ads, you know, or something like that. So like really different in that sense, and that you're really going into the community, into the cult, into the quote unquote brand love, the relationship between the customer and that homegrown bodega brand. And then the advantage of that is the relationship is genuine and you turn those customers into advocates. So the marketing becomes the word of mouth marketing. And I mean, does that ring true to you? I don't know, you know, if you would be resistant to using all the words that I'm using to describe it, but it sounds like that.
Yeah, the brand has benefited from this organic word of mouth growth since its inception, and I think a big part of that is that it's novel. You know, the combination of honey and chili peppers, honey infused with chili peppers, is a novel thing. Again, it's these two of nature's most wonderful ingredients that everybody's had separately, but most people have never experienced together. So this idea is this novel thing that's so simple that everybody you know, can taste and react to and share, became like a thing that, you know, I think there are a lot of brands, a lot of products that people love, but sometimes for whatever reason, people don't actually talk about them or like to share them with their friends. In our case, we were very lucky to be this product that both people loved, but also they like talking about it and being the person to share it with their friends and family and community hey, have you tried this? You've never tried it before. You got to taste it. You got to try it on
that's an
this. You got to try it on
interesting
that. And
insight.
so,
You're right. There are a lot of products that people love, but they don't necessarily talk about it. And if I try, and the only reason I'm doing this is to see if there's lessons for other people who want to start, But like what is new, what I hear you saying also, it's not just the brand love. That is part of it, but it's something that people want to talk about. And in your case, if I put more words on what you're saying, it sounds like it's the innovation, it's the spark, it's the creativity that makes it kind of newsworthy. Newsworthy, not like New York Times newsworthy, but friend to friend newsworthy. And it was something about that creativity that mattered.
yeah. And I think, home cooks and chefs alike, both we're looking for the next great pairing for the product. So it became this quest, this adventure for home cooks and chefs to find the next great thing to put it on and share that with their friends and their community. So we created this tool for cooks. And then, something that I viewed as really just a pizza condiment. Once it got into the hands of people who were far more talented and creative, they took it to all these different corners of the culinary world.
Interesting.
Ooh,
That's
cool.
fascinating. That's really, really interesting.
I can't wait to try it on ice cream. I mean, that
Yeah. And your
It's good,
cucumber.
butter-
awesome to me.
Butter pecan, vanilla. It's
That's
good.
incredible. Yeah,
Sounds awesome.
I love the point that Barbara's making, Mike, though, because as you guys were talking, I was picturing myself and the mental exercise of sharing the story, like telling the story about what you just talked about to friends, and having the realization that they would say, "Man, that's really interesting. Tell us more." You know what I mean? As opposed to, I can't say that about a lot of brands.
No.
Where it's like, so I definitely see that DNA is sort of built into this really interesting, authentic, and very, very fun sort of conversation to have, really.
And it starts from the brand DNA, which is the spicy and hot, which you don't usually put together. I mean, spicy, hot, and sweet.
And
that
sweet,
you don't
yeah.
usually put together like that.
That's right.
In fact, I
Mike,
can't even say it.
That's right. And Mike, is this hard to do? Is this like, because I mean, can anyone just say, I'm going to put chili peppers and something sweet together, or have you
told you how long it took to make this recipe?
Yeah. So there's a
infusion. Remember Americus?
That's right, infusion. But infusion could mean who knows what. I'm not a food scientist, but
Well, yeah.
tell us about how you protect it. Yes.
Yeah, I can't get into all of the details of the production, but I can say that on the surface, something that appears to be fairly simple. It's honey and chili peppers. Ingredients everybody knows, but the actual infusion process is a lot more complicated than meets the eye.
Sort of like a good wine.
Yes.
Yes.
You get stuck on grapes.
Honey,
It's not going to make a good wine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Secret formula.
I think it's very hard to patent a recipe in the food world.
Right.
It's not something that you can commonly patent. So really what you're doing is you're building a brand, and you're making a quality product and being consistent in your quality, and really building a brand that people know and love and want to continue to support. And that's the moat. I mean, it's, we were the original brand in the category. We created this new category, and there's lots of other brands in the space now, and lots of private label in the space, and but we welcome all of that, because that really just validates what we're doing. It validates the category of which we're the original
category,
product.
and then you kind of look for the best, the original.
That's right. And they can't touch Mike.
They could try, but
But they can build up the community. And going back to what we were talking about, a part of this is this brand love, this cult, this idea that it's, all his friends in the pizza world, all around the world.
The food service part of our business is really important, because it's both a big revenue driver for us, but also it's this huge marketing engine for the brand. And that's not something that can be replicated very easily. That's years and years of work. It's thousands of miles traveled. It's visits to restaurants in every corner of the country, and establishing relationships, not just with the owners of those restaurants, but the line cooks and everyone on down to the dishwashers, and learning all of their names and making sure that they know that they're appreciated, and building that community that way is what we've done. And we have an incredible food service team that has logged a lot of miles.
I mean, that's a whole different
building this
distribution
network.
channel, and building those relationships. That's a huge moat. Well, Mike Kurtz, end of time. Thank you so much for being with us. Our guest today was Mike Kurtz, the founder of Mike's Hot Honey. And if people want to buy this product or see where it is or learn more about your story, where can they go?
Well, you can find us online at mikeshothoney.com. You can buy our products there or on Amazon or in the honey aisle of your local supermarket. And
That's right.
look out for the Garrett Mike's Hot Honey popcorn. It should be hitting shelves very, very soon in a supermarket near you.
That's right.
You heard it here first.
That's right.
Yes.
This is awesome.
Thank you so much. And that's all we have time for today. We'd like to thank our producer, Jacob Grodnick. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back soon. Till then, this has been Marketing Matters on the Wharton Podcast Network. I'm Barbara Kahn, here with Americus Read.